Hey everybody. So my class got canceled tonight because the streets are an ice rink. And so what I wanted to do was for all of my pottery peeps who are at home tonight trying to stay warm, I wanted to show you guys what we were going to do tonight. Pretty basic stuff, but that way you can have this as a reference. So tonight I want to show you guys how to pull a handle and also trim a mug and do some different unique things as you're trimming. So whenever I pull handles, you want to start, I think it's easiest when you start with a fresh piece of clay right off the block instead of something that's been recycled or used or thrown before. So I just kind of took off a little chunk like this. This probably could make 6, 7, maybe even 8 handles. So a little bit goes a long way. When I start with my handles, I like to start with kind of a carrot shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to taper one end just by compressing it down. So I'm leaving this end kind of fat and I'm tapering it down. What this does is it gets the clay moving already before I even have to add any water or do any pulling. So right from the get-go, you should have something that looks like a carrot and kind of fat on one end and tapered on the other. Then you want a bucket of water. And I'm going to go ahead and get this all wet. And as I pull down, what I want to do is I'm putting kind of just moderate pressure on this. I don't want to like really squeeze it. If I squeeze too hard, I'm going to pull off some of the clay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull gently straight down and all the way through the end. Another thing that's really normal that happens is if you stop pulling right before you get to the tip, and I'll show you what happens there. A lot of times what can happen is you end up with this kind of fat piece of clay right here at the bottom. So there you go, there's my little close-up. And that just makes it hard to maneuver. So I'm going to take that part off and kind of show you. So after every pull, I'm going to turn it. Okay, so I'm going to pull, and I'm going to turn 180 degrees. Pull, turn. Pull, turn. And then after a while, the clay should start to stretch, okay? Sometimes you'll see people, they'll put it in between a couple fingers. So like if you make like a little shadow puppet, go right through the eyeball there, okay? So my fingers kind of look like this, okay? And that can help flatten the handle. And again, I pull and then turn. That way, I'm getting equal pressure and you'll end up with a smoother looking handle. So anytime I make handles, it's helpful to look at the thickness of whatever piece you're going to put it on. Okay, so here's the rim of the piece that I'm going to put this handle on eventually. And right now, if you see the thickness of this handle, it's a little bit thicker than the rim of the piece that I'm going to be putting it on. So I'd probably thin it just a little bit more. If you've got a handle that's really, really thick on a piece that has a really thin rim, it tends to kind of look a little odd. And likewise, if you have a piece that has a thick rim but a really, really thin handle, then a lot of times, again, it just looks off balance. So I try to have the handles look as close to the same thickness as the rim of whatever I'm putting it on. A couple of other little things that are just more design elements than anything else. A lot of times I like to take my thumb and just run it right down the spine of the handle and do that a couple of times. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but then you get a little bit of a ridge there, which is nice for catching glaze. All right, when you're done, so this is the section right here that I'm going to be using for my handle. I don't need all of this up here, and I'm probably going to end up cutting off some of the base. So, but you need it to set up and dry a little bit before you can actually put it on a piece. So a couple different ways to do that. One is you can lay it flat on a piece of canvas. I also have some backer board, which is water absorbent, which is helpful. So you could lay it flat and straight and then just let that hang out for a little bit. Another way that you can do it is this. Let's see if I can turn my little camera here. So is go ahead and get it started drying on a curve. So if I were gonna do that, then I just kind of pinch off the last little bit. For now, you don't want to touch it. Just let it sit there and dry for a little ways. And then you'll know that it's ready to put on when you can touch your handle and it doesn't show a fingerprint, okay? If you can touch it and there's a fingerprint showing, it's too wet to handle. And if you are trying to use a handle that's really wet, it's gonna be so messy, and you don't wanna try to mess with that. It does still need to be pliable though. So if your handle is too dry, then you're gonna need to try to rehydrate that a little bit. So, all right, so we're gonna trim next, and then we'll put this handle on, all right? All right, so let's talk about how to trim. I'm gonna show you the basic setup for trimming, and then I wanna show you how to do a squared bottom on a mug. So the things that you're gonna need when you are trimming, it's helpful to have a needle tool handy. I like to use a flexible rib, or a metal rib works great to help burnish the bottom. And then either a flat stick or a ruler, pencil, and then a wood, an extra wood tool. And then the other thing that you're gonna need is a ribbon tool, which is what you'll use to trim. So as you're starting, what you're gonna wanna do is you need to figure out the thickness of the bottom that you're gonna be trimming. And the main reason for that is if I stick this on the wheel and I start going to town, there's a chance that either I will leave too much thickness on the bottom, or I will trim and turn it into a planter. And that's not always desirable. So here's how you would measure the thickness of the bottom. So I'm gonna take my flat ruler here, my wood tool. I'm gonna rest it right on the base here. I'm gonna do it backwards so you guys can see. So I'm gonna rest it right in the center of this, and then I'm gonna make a little mark with my pencil. Then I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the outside, on the wheel head. Okay. And now I know that that is the thickness of the very center that I'm working with. So what a lot of times what I like to do is I like to keep this somewhere where I can see it while I'm trimming, and that way I know how much I'm able to trim off. If you're aiming at about 1/4 inch thickness, then I know I can trim off that much from the bottom of this mug. So I'm going to set that over there, set this aside. The other thing that I want to do, because of what I'm going to show you guys with squaring off a mug, is I just kind of want to get a basic feel for about how far out I can trim on the profile here. You'll know that your piece is ready to trim. It needs to be leather hard. So leather hard should still feel cold to the touch. And I like to just check by pressing my fingernail into the, which my daughter so lovely painted my fingernails the other day. So if I can press gently in and leave an indentation, then it's ready to go. If you can press on this edge here and it just goes straight in, you need to let it dry for a little bit longer. And likewise, if you try to do that and nothing happens, then we need to rehydrate it. Okay, so now we are going to, we're gonna get this guy centered on here. So I like to start with it as much in center as possible. And I'm just gonna show you a real basic way of getting this guy centered. So I'm gonna hold this up here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I've got my pencil here, and I'm gonna make a circle. And what you should see is, what you're aiming for, I should say, is that the distance from the edge to the circle is equal all the way around. So you can see how this right here is more narrow than this over here. So I want to go that way with my piece. So I'm going to scooch it over that way just a little bit. Okay. And now I'm going to go just outside that circle and make another circle We'll scooch it just a little bit more. And now if I hold my finger to the edge here, it should be hitting evenly all the way around. All right, so we've got this centered. Now that it's centered, we need to make sure that it's going to stay on the wheel. So I'm going to use 3 little pieces of clay. Make little sausages and hold down your piece as you're pressing the clay into the wheel. So I use 3 kind of in a little bit of a triangle around the base. So I press down into the wheel more than I do into the side of the mug to start. That way I'm not going to press a hole or anything into my piece. And then I will kind of slowly press that and gently press that up. And now it's secured to the wheel, and that's what we want to make sure that we have. The wheel. Okay, now we're going to trim. If you just want to do basic trimming, okay, again, I always want to sit with my body over my piece, okay, and I want to anchor my elbow or arms onto my legs because the clay really is going to want to push me around. So, and I also hold my ribbon tool like this, right up close to the top instead of like this. If I hold it like this and I'm leaning back, there's a good chance that the piece is going to kind of push me around a little bit. You can see that the rim of my piece is not totally flat. All right, so I'm going to hold this really tight, resting it together, and then I put my other hand right on top here. And I just want to see little ribbons of clay coming off of the edge here. I typically will trim the profile or the edge before I trim anything in the foot here. So you can trim all the way down. To your heart's content. All right, let me show you guys how to square off this foot here. So what I'm going to do is hold this again if I can. All right, so you can see where my pencil lines are. So I'm going to go in about 1/2 inch. Okay, now what I want to do is I'm going to take a rasp and I'm going to grate the edge. All right, so I'm going to grate this guy. Hold on to your piece. This is why it's important to check and see how thick. Okay, how thick it is. So I've got that at a pretty good angle. You can also go more straight up and down. Okay, and I want to square this guy. And I'm not going to go all the way to the circle, I'm just going to go close to it. All right, so now that I've got that squared, here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to get this sponge wet just a little bit, just to smooth the edge there. Okay, and now I'm actually going to trim the inside. All right, so I'm going to start by making a little indentation right in the center. And this is going to show me how far down I can go, okay, based on the measurement that we took right at the beginning. So I'm just taking the corner of this ribbon tool and I'm going to go down to the depth that I know is safe, where I'm not going to trim through the bottom. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to come out here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way from the outside in to create a little bit of a foot here. And sometimes I'll kind of work my way out as well. You got to just, again, make sure that you hold this ribbon tool really strong and go really slow with your movements. If you go too fast, you're going to end up with a big swirl, and a lot of times you'll take a big chunk out. So just go nice and slow. So that little indentation is going to tell me when I need to stop. Because as soon as it disappears, then I know I've gone down as far as I can. Almost there. Now that I've trimmed all the way down to where that divot stops, I know that I don't want to go any farther. So you can see I do this exact same technique even if I didn't square the base. That's how you would trim in a foot. And then I can take this and just kind of smooth, trim off any excess that I don't want there. Oop. And if you press too hard, then it'll come detached from the wheel. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flexible rib here. You could also for sure use a metal rib. This one is covered in clay, so I'm not going to use that one. And all I'm going to do here is just hold the side of it to my piece here, and what that does is it burnishes. So especially if you're using a really groggy clay, what this will do is it helps press in any of that grog and smooths your piece. So I like it especially on the bottom of pieces when I'm trimming, because then it feels really, really nice and smooth. So it's not going to scratch any tables or anything like that. Then I'm just going to burnish the side. I'm going to trim a couple little lines on the side just for interest. They'll also catch the glaze really nicely. And then if you wanted to get real fancy, you could take, I've got some different stylus tools here that are kind of fun. And you could do some texture on those squared areas or even carving. So let's see if we can get that to do it. All right, so let's go ahead and get this handle attached. So we've got my fancy pants little mug here, all trimmed, decorated, ready to roll. The handle here that has been dried a little bit so that I can handle it without distorting it. So I'm just going to do a pretty basic handle and show you guys how I would do that. When I do handles, I like to use an X-Acto knife. If you don't have something like that handy, then a needle tool will work just fine. So the first thing that you want to do though is kind of line it up to see the profile and how much that you want to use of your handle. You can make handles that look like that. You can flip it upside down and do handles like that. You can do a little lug of a handle, a little tiny thing, any number of different ways to do handles. So, but the first thing that I'm going to do is I just want to take this handle and I want to cut it at a little bit of an angle to get this ready here. So I'm just going to cut a little bit off the top. Okay, so my handle cut looks a little bit like that on the top part. I'm going to line that up where I want it to go. And I got to decide if I want it, yeah, there we go. I want it to be kind of on the side. So that to me feels a little bit big for the size here, so I'm going to cut off a little bit more. It's always better to cut off a little bit at a time instead of cutting off too much and then having to make another handle. All right, so let's see how that guy looks. Awesome. All right, so once I've got it where I'm like, I like the size and the location, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just gently set this on my mug here. And I want to line it up so that it is as straight as I can get it to be. So that's kind of what I'm seeing for my angle. I'm going to take a needle tool and just gently make a little line around where this handle is sitting, so that way I know that that's where it's going to go after I score this. Okay, so you can kind of see. Okay, so I've got it scored there and there. And then I make my own little scoring tools out of Starbucks gift cards. So, especially the plastic ones. So I just cut them into little strips and then I use scissors and just cut little zigzags. If not, you can use your needle tool. But I like these because then I get scoring done a lot faster that way. So I'm gonna make pretty deep scores, kind of little cuts into the side of this mug here. And then before I score the handle, I'm actually going to take some slip. You can also use water, you can use vinegar, anything that would kind of wet down your piece here. Okay, I'm going to glop that on. And then you can either use a scoring tool again, or you can take your needle tool to press that and kind of rescore and press that moisture into the clay. All right, I'm going to set that aside. Now I'm going to score this. All right, so my handle is scored. I'm going to put a little bit more of this slip on here. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to support the inside with my hand, and I'm going to just gently press it onto the spots where I know I want it to be first. Okay, so I'm not putting a lot of pressure yet. I want to make sure that it's all lined up first. Okay, and then I'm going to hold the inside here and gently kind of press and wiggle, because I want those scored parts of the clay to come together. Scoring essentially kind of works like a puzzle, right? So you've scored the mug and then you've scored the handle, and then as you press them together, you're pressing these puzzle pieces together, and that's what you want. That makes a strong handle. So you can kind of press down, you can compress here. You can take again, and it's always worth it to spend a little bit of time getting those handles on. So you can see that I squished out a bunch of that slip. So I always do handles with a little paintbrush, kind of a soft bristled paintbrush, and that way I can use that to get in there to clean up any of the slip that squirted out. It also, I like to use it to compress into those little seams as well, to help prevent any sort of cracking. because my fingers just don't fit in there. So, and this way I'm also touching my handle less, which then keeps it cleaner, less distorted, less fingerprints, all that good stuff. All right, once you've got it on there, you've got this handle that you like, then you're all set. Last thing I would say is anytime you're putting an attachment on, especially handle, after you get it on, I like to wrap my pieces in plastic again really well so that the moisture content of the handle and the mug have time to equalize, because the handle is going to have more water in it because I just made it today versus the mug that I made yesterday. So, you know, wrap those in plastic for at least a day or so. That way you'll have less of a chance of this handle popping off. All right, enjoy making and trimming your mugs.